It's early. Probably a little warmer, but it's early. John Ziegler joining us once again. And John, as always, sincerely appreciate the time.
Thanks so much for having me. And it is a little bit early, but it's also going to get up to about 66 degrees today. So I'll take that exchange.
Yeah, that's. I think I would take that at this point as well. John, couple things I want to get into with you this morning, but wanted to start with just kind of the most recent developments with the letters that you've received from Jerry Sandusky. I think it's a couple, right, over the last few weeks here.
Yeah, well, Jerry and I have exchanged a lot of letters since our prison interview earlier this year, which obviously facilitated a lot of other things, including a Today Show interview and the Piers Morgan interview. And the reason why we've had this flurry of activity is because the key post-arrest victim number 9, who had the most horrific allegations in the trial by far, has decided not to take the Penn State settlement and is in fact suing Penn State. And as part of that lawsuit has made just a flat-out ridiculous, I don't know if you call it an allegation or just has created a narrative that just doesn't make any sense. And his lawyers have released this to the media that somehow victim number 9, Jerry Sandusky, and Joe Paterno all had lunch together, and the implication from the reporting on the lawsuit was that they met on multiple occasions, and that Joe Paterno may have even implied that Joe Paterno had an idea of what Jerry Sandusky was up to. Now, to be very clear, victim number 9 met Jerry Sandusky apparently in 2005, which was well after Jerry had retired, and I knew instantaneously that this was a ridiculous story, and I wanted to verify with Jerry that in fact it was. I spoke to Dottie Sandusky, and her initial reaction was exactly as I expected, which was that just doesn't make any sense, because she didn't think that Jerry had ever had lunch with Joe, period, after the retirement, because contrary to media myths, they were not close at all, and I actually felt, having spent some time with Jerry, that it was clear that they didn't like each other at all, and that might have been putting it mildly. So I got a couple letters from Jerry, and in fact, he verified it exactly as I expected, and I know that people are very dubious of anything Jerry says, but I have to tell you that almost, not everything, but certainly almost everything that Jerry has ever said to me has been corroborated in some sort of way. And also, Jerry is not emphatic about anything. I mean, Jerry's the kind of guy that, for better or for worse, you ask him what time it is, and if he doesn't have 3 watches, he might not give you a direct answer, which is partially why I think the Bob Costas interview went haywire the way that it did. And he was very emphatic on this, and he has sent me a new letter. I posted a copy of one of the letters at our website, framingpaterno.com, and I've now also posted the text of this most recent letter, and I sent it to you because I thought, this is kind of an interesting letter on a couple different perspectives. So, did you want me to share it, or?
Yeah, John, if you would just read through it, and as you said, I just want to point out, because there are people, and I know some of them, that I can't believe you're going to give Jerry Sandusky any airtime, or I can't believe you're going to believe anything he says. And I would just say I think it's okay to occasionally get the perspective or the words from some of the people that were actually involved. I know the Free Report couldn't be bothered to do that. I realize a lot of people in the media can't be bothered to do that. But the thing with this letter from Sandusky that you're about to read, John, too, is I think this can be corroborated by anybody who had any knowledge of the relationship between Jerry and Joe Paterno. It is not credible. I mean, it is not something that even has the slightest ring of, well, yeah, that's possible. It just doesn't.
And I also, I want to reiterate that as well, that I fully understand why people do not want to listen to Jerry, regardless of his veracity. But after I read the letter, I do want to get into why I think it's significant, and why I think this overall issue has potentially enormous significance and why I have decided to focus on it. So here's the gist of the letter. It's not very long, but he writes, John, I was wondering if you thought about contacting Jay Paterno and some of the other coaches to ask them if Joe would have ever had lunch with the accuser and me. If nothing else, maybe the Paternos will realize how ridiculous the allegations have been. It might mean more for others to comment on how ridiculous this is. And then he goes on to talk about the case in general. He says, they made it up as they go along, and they are led. If a bigger accusation is needed, eventually it is given. If a date isn't right, they change it. If they don't say what is wanted, they are lying. If people are caught lying on the stand, it is ignored. Witnesses can say the same thing. One is indicted, the other must have misunderstood. If it doesn't fit, it can be placed in different locations. If it's not enough, make it more. If they came back over and over years after the fact, it was because they wanted something, but wouldn't want anything now. If they just remembered something bad, it was because their memories were unlocked. If they said something good, they forgot. If it didn't make sense, it was all right. If it happened to him, it happened to you. If you show a picture of them as a young lad, they wouldn't lie. If you don't pay bills, you're still credible. If they have problems or get in trouble, it's because of Jerry, even though others in their family have had problems or also got in trouble. If you make an allegation of sex abuse, you are a quote-unquote victim. I could go on, but won't. Then he signs Jerry, and then he says, this is just meant to tell you the way it has been and is. It's there for me to endure. However, while enduring, I want to battle. I battle for all those who have stood by me and those who come forward to help. With the gratitude that remains in my heart, I go forward. Now, again, I fully understand that a lot of people are going to go, I don't want to hear that crap because this guy's a pedophile and he destroyed Penn State and he's destroyed lives and all that. And that was my view at the very beginning of this, Jeff. And you and I have talked a lot on and off the air. My focus on this at framingpaterno.com and this 2-year effort has really been on trying to figure out what happened here, number one, to find the truth. And I always believed that meant that Joe Paterno was going to be exonerated. But I'm really starting to get into a quandary here because I'm really starting to believe that what we believe to be the truth about the original crimes here is not the full truth, and it's haunting me personally, and it's also creating quite a bit of a problem as far as how to move forward on this project, because I'm fully aware that is a extraordinarily politically incorrect view of this story, and one that very few people are going to want to believe. But to me, it's what makes the most sense in the larger scheme of things, and so I just wanted to share that with your audience, and the larger Victim 9 story, I think, goes a long way to what I'm saying here.
I want to bring in Tony Riccardi. John, as I mentioned to you off air, Tony covered the trial for us, so he was in the courtroom each day. And the one thing I want to ask you, Tony, is what Sandusky touches on there is, some of these stories did change. The dates were wrong in some stories. But in the courtroom, and when you look at that, I guess in the abject, I think there are some questions raised about, well, then how legitimate could it be? And I've listened to there are child abuse experts that say, well, that is not uncommon, and crime experts that will say that's not uncommon. And in fact, they would question if the story was exactly the same every time, that would not be consistent. In the courtroom, did it come across as credible, the witnesses, and in particular, Victim 9? Did the stories ring true to you as you were watching in the courtroom?
I think not only for myself, but among others that were in the courtroom, alleged victim 9, however you want to call him, had the least credible story because his story did not follow the pattern of everyone else. And it was so far beyond what we had already heard. And it detailed a very brazen Jerry Sandusky. And I think what a lot of people may have given credence to his testimony was that he didn't retain a lawyer. McGettigan had asked him straight up if he had counsel retained, and he said no, which gives the believability that he's not in it for the money. And McGettigan was actually the first person that was told of Victim 9's abuse. But there was a grooming process that had been laid out by the previous victims. And for number 9, it seemed like he stayed over his house, and as soon as he stayed over, even that first night, Jerry Sandusky came at him very aggressively, which was unlike the testimony that we had heard before. And it continued. Even like small little tidbits of he never, after staying over his house for 4 years, never ate at the house, which seemed a little odd. And even after all this had happened, only before Jerry Sandusky was arrested, had asked him for Illinois tickets for a home football game because, he had a friend coming up, and he asked Jerry. That seemed a little unusual. But maybe even more unusual, the cross-examination wasn't very thorough. I don't know if maybe Joanne Mandola didn't have much to go on, or was maybe surprised at the testimony that was given. But in my notes that I had from it, not a very thorough cross-examination, and the testimony from number 9, not all that credible.
And Jeff, that's exactly what I've been told by other people who were in the courtroom, almost to a word and almost to a man. That victim 9 was the least credible of all of the victims, so a lot of people were probably thinking to themselves, well, so what? There were 10 victims. Why is this significant? Well, first of all, if in fact he's lying, which I believe that he is, I think victim 9 has totally made up the story completely. And part of the reason why I believe that is because his story involves Dottie Sandusky blatantly having to perjure herself because of his specific allegations having occurred at the house, him screaming in the basement and all that business. So it doesn't only fit with the larger story, but I don't believe that Dottie is perjuring herself, and I don't believe the story. And I think this Joe Paterno lunch thing is the icing on the cake to prove that. He was the star post-arrest victim. He was the one that the prosecution put the most faith in. He was the one with the most horrific allegations. And I think for a lot of people, the avalanche or the alleged avalanche that occurred after the arrest is what really sealed Jerry Sandusky's fate. Well, I now believe that avalanche was bogus and was based in large part on Penn State having made it very clear they were going to open up their pocketbooks to anybody who came forward with an allegation. And in fact, that's exactly what has happened. And to finish off on the point with regarding victim 9 not having a lawyer, well, he clearly has a lawyer now, and he clearly wouldn't accept the settlement that Penn State put forward. And now he's making stories up to open that pocketbook up further. So I think this brings a lot of the entire case into grave question about the true nature of Jerry Sandusky's crimes.
I agree with you, John. The one thing I want to go back to, though, and in your conversations with Jerry, if it has come up, I haven't seen it or I've forgotten. But the one thing that has always, I guess, bothered me most about Sandusky and his defense is in the 1999 case, and if in fact, and I believe he was told by the police, listen,
right.
We can't have you showering with kids.
Right.
Don't do that anymore.
Right.
He says, I won't. That's where I always, because I keep coming back to, I do have questions about several of the allegations against Sandusky.
Jeff,
but I
totally agree, and I did address this with Jerry, and I'm right there with you.
And what was his response?
Well, for just to be very clear, I mean, and I know, unfortunately, you have to always make so many caveats in this story, or else people think you're crazy or whatever. I do believe that Jerry committed what would be deemed to be crimes, maybe crimes that he isn't even sure were crimes. I'm not even 100% sure he understood them to be crimes. And I think he had pedophilic tendencies because of exactly what you're talking about. How do you go take a shower with victim number 2 in the McQuarrie episode alone at night after being told by police, this is, you've got to stop doing this. We almost arrested you here. I mean, a rational human being would never do it again. Well, Jerry's response, and I got into this with him extensively, and people can see the transcript at our website, framingpaterno.com, it was basically 2 things. Number one, that he didn't think 1998 was a big deal. I mean, I can't tell you. That was maybe the most shocking thing about my interview, Jeff, was how Jerry viewed, and the best analogy I can come up with is, Jerry viewed 1998 as him being pulled over for speeding and being given a warning. I mean, that's how little a big deal it was in his mind, and I believe him that he believes that. And based upon the testimony of victim number 6, it seems impossible to believe now, but I actually can understand it back in 1998 because I don't believe anything sexual remotely happened in 1998 with victim number 6, and I don't believe a crime occurred there.
Right.
But the second part of what he told me was that the boy number 2 was like a son to him. And I think that's an important point in this entire case, is people think that these were random boys or victims. Number 2 is the key to the whole case. He says nothing happened. He was, I believe, closer to Jerry than some of his own sons. And it's the real number 2 story has never been told except at framingpaterno.com, and you need to understand it to understand this case.
And, well, I'll tell you what, let's take a break here, John, and get that out of the way, and then we'll be back to wrap things up. Again, John Ziegler joining us via the phone line from California, and we'll have about 5 minutes or so when we get back. And again, we're joined via the phone line from California by John Ziegler. FramingPaterno.com is the website, FramingPaterno.com. And John, kind enough again to join us and talk about some of the latest developments. John, if this thing, well, when this thing goes to court, because I've thought several times certain things were going to go certain ways in this case, and they didn't. How optimistic are you? Because this one seems pretty easy to shoot holes in and to shoot down the alleged victim's story, but I don't know what to make of it anymore when we get into our court system.
Well, I don't believe that the Victim 9 case is ever going to go to court. I happen to believe that all that's really happened with this case and a couple of the other cases that have not settled is that the lawyers have just decided to push the right buttons to make Penn State open up its pocketbook even further than it already has. And pushing the Joe Paterno button was obviously a no-brainer on the part of Victim 9's attorney. So I wish that Victim 6 and Victim 9 would actually go to court, because I think it would be fascinating to find out what would happen. I think Penn State ought to fight them all the way to the courthouse, because I think both cases would turn out to be totally bogus, and that Penn State has absolutely no culpability in either of those cases, and probably because neither Victim 6 or Victim 9 had a crime committed against them. So unfortunately, I doubt that's going to happen, because I think Penn State will cave. And I guess I'm just, you know me, Jeff, I'm not an optimist. Franco Harris and I joke all the time. I mean, he's the optimist, I'm the pessimist. But I just don't know how, in the Graham, Spanier, Tim Curley, and Gary Schultz trial, how there can be any justice when Penn State has already declared their guilt in every way possible. And also, it's going to be impossible for them to use their strongest defense, which is that Jerry Sandusky very likely was not the monster that he has been painted out to be, that the evidence does not back that up, because obviously no one's going to believe that. He's been convicted of 45 counts of child sex abuse, and the perception is going to be, well, how the hell did you not know? They didn't know because there was no evidence. And the reason there was no evidence, Jeff, I'm becoming increasingly convinced, is because there was nothing horrific happening, that this was a much more of a gray area situation than we have been led to believe. That's the only way this case makes any sense in its totality. And it's as I said at the beginning of this interview, it's breaking me up personally, because I don't know what to do with this, because I know no one's going to believe me. But I've sought out to find the truth here, and right now I believe that's the truth.
I guess I'm holding out hope that because several of the board members, even though I certainly question their judgment to this point, the story again of Sandusky having lunch with Paterno and the boy has to ring just as hollow to them, if not more so, with their knowledge of this.
Right. But Jeff, if we were living in a rational world, what would have happened at this point, when that story came out, is that Jerry's denial to me would have been given credible in the media. Of course it was not. I knew it would not. And the Paternos themselves would have rushed out and said, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But they are afraid of being seen as anti-victim. Scott Paterno has made that very, very clear. Yeah. And so because there was no blowback, why would they care, Jeff? Why would they care? The truth doesn't matter in this case. It's all about perception. It's all about doing what's best for your own self-interest and making it go away. Penn State has been patted on the back constantly by the news media for making these things go away, and they're going to make this one go away. I'll bet you on it.
I would love to take that bet because I really want you to be wrong, and I'm still hoping, but yeah, I'm not taking the bet.
Understood. You're a smart man.
Well, I don't know about that, but yeah, I just I don't have money to part with. John, we sincerely appreciate the time. We are flat out of it. Tony and I will be back tomorrow morning with another edition of Morning Guys.